Hey, security peeps, we are live once again with another edition of Breaking Into Cybersecurity 2.0, our leadership series. And I am super duper excited to talk about the person we have on today, Miss Lydia Payne-Johnson. But before we get to her, I am Renee Small, cybersecurity super recruiter, helping amazing security talent get into opportunity and wonderful leaders hire security talent. My co-host is here with us today, Chris Foulon. Say hi to the people, Chris.
Hey everyone.
And our special guest, our leadership series guest for today is I call her my Lydia. Lydia Payne-Johnson. Say hi to everyone, Lydia.
Hi, everyone.
And Lydia is like Chief Privacy Officer extraordinaire. She's been Chief Privacy Officer at tons of major banking institutions, Freddie Mac, Morgan Stanley. I mean, we're just going to jump into Lydia's background, how she got to this place, how you can get to this place, how privacy interacts with security teams at these organizations, all that good stuff. So, Lydia, where do you want to start?
Well, let's start at the beginning because it's a little different. Privacy, if you think of privacy in the United States, it's still relatively young. It's only about 20 years old, whereas security has been around forever. And so, I was at Morgan Stanley, the Chief Privacy Officer at Morgan Stanley. And before I was the head of global advertising. And all of a sudden they came to me and said, we've got this thing that we have to do. We have to comply with this new law on privacy. We need to send this notice to our clients. We need to, we don't want the clients to opt out. And you know how to talk to the clients because you've been in marketing, and you have a law degree, so you're the chief privacy officer. And that was pretty much the conversation.
So you were voluntold into your first chief privacy officer.
But I also should put into perspective that the early chief privacy officers, at least in financial services, came out of marketing.
Wow.
The people that were just kind of recruited, and I'm talking about not just the investment firms, but also the banks and the credit card companies, that a lot of us were in marketing. Many already had law degrees, and we were finding our way around. So now if you fast forward to today, the chief privacy officers that you find are coming out of legal, they're coming out of risk, they are coming out of I would say primarily risk, or coming out of the business. And you have some people that have been involved with, say, data management, which is now called data governance. So chief privacy officers come from a varied background. It's very broad. And if you recall the Equifax breach, that there was some initial rattling of cages around the fact that the Equifax chief privacy officer had a degree in music. Well, I have an undergraduate degree in music. Okay. So, yeah.
What's the thing with the music majors becoming chief privacy officers?
but they did back off of it because, again, we come from a lot of different backgrounds. And so whether you have a music degree or a degree in English or a degree in, engineering, electrical engineering, it doesn't matter. Do you understand the space? And I think that that's really what the important thing is. So, and
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Renee.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that there are challenges now, as I have talked to, law students who are graduating, talk to young people. There are a lot of challenges now in terms of getting into this space and also getting to be a chief privacy officer.
So, what are some of those challenges that people are facing right now?
Well, you can't step out of law school and be a chief privacy officer because privacy requires that you understand the business, that you understand the applicable laws and regs, that you understand what the scope of privacy is. And privacy is so broad.
Hmm.
It factors into um, your HR. It factors into information security. It factors into um, you know retail. It factors into healthcare. It factors into a lot of things, and it's understanding not only how that how privacy factors in it, but then how does it operate, and operationalizing that within the business is really important to building, managing, sustaining a privacy program.
Hmm.
So those are the challenges, and then privacy teams tend to be small.
Hmm.
How do you, like security, I'm sure privacy is a conflicting approach to business. How do you work with the business to balance what they want to do? Sure. What they want to do versus what they should do from a privacy perspective?
Oof. Well, I think the first thing is, do they even understand that privacy is a part of their stack? All right. So you really have to get in and start to educate them. I'll use my Freddie Mac experience as an example. When I got to Freddie Mac, there wasn't even a program, and their theory around data was that data was free. It could be shared freely. Why do we need these protections? We haven't had a breach, so why do we need a privacy program? Why do we need a chief privacy officer? Okay. So in at least the first 3 to 4 years that I was there was this whole education process with the business and helping the business to understand and define privacy, define the data that was in scope, um, to help them understand that it wasn't just um, this data they collected, say from borrowers or from investors, but their data was in there too. They owned a home, if they bought a home or they refinanced a home, and if Freddie Mac owned the loan, guess what? Your data is there too. So how would you feel if your data was breached? So it's really important to be that person who can sit with the business and help to educate them around privacy and why it's important, and engage them in a way that they become partners, that you can deputize them, if you would, into learning about privacy and to managing it for themselves. A lot of times they think that you just want to come in from the top down and just tell them this is what you must do, as opposed to, I think as privacy professionals, we have to be nimble around understanding the business, how it operates, how they use the data, who they share the data with, where they store the data, and then putting that into context with respect to, all right, here's your privacy compliance obligation, and working with them on that. And when they have issues, partnering with them to help come up with a practical solution that's reasonable, that's defensible. If in fact they had to go to court, or an auditor came in or a regulator came in, is it defensible?
Right. So, Lydia, when you would go in, I can imagine the business, especially businesses that are unaware of the differences between privacy and security. Like, so you have your chief privacy officer, you have your security officer, security. chief security officer, how would you explain to them or describe the differences and where your where the line of demarcation is?
There isn't a there really isn't a line of demarcation between privacy and security. I think that they are two sides of the same coin. I've always approached it that way. To me, privacy is um, the heads side of the coin. That's where you're collecting the information. That's where you're bringing it into the organization. Security is the tails side of the equation, because now that the data is in house, what are the controls? What are the uh, tactics and tools that you're going to use to help protect that information from unauthorized access? How are you going to monitor it? How is it set up in a way that helps you to comply with the applicable laws and regs, um, US only, or maybe, globally? And so the partnership with the security team is central to the success of a good and strong privacy program.
And with privacy changing, each state having their own regs, each country, region in the world having their own regs, how do businesses and or even students coming into the field, how do they grapple all the different things that they need to consider?
Well, Chris, it is an alphabet soup of regs and laws and compliance. It's really, at the end of the day, when you kind of get under the hood, they're really actually all trying to do the same thing. And yes, GDPR has some additional requirements, and they have a slightly different definition of personal information than the US. But at the end of the day, it's around protecting people's information. And so how you develop the framework, well, I don't want to get too far ahead because you said students coming in. It's really important to have a strong foundation around what do you have to comply with. Um, where do those particular laws and regs, or what are the touch points within the organization that those laws and regs apply? Um, where do you need to really kind of get under the hood and do an assessment and see, do we have the appropriate controls in place? Where do we need to tighten things up? And if you don't have the appropriate uh, controls, then okay, what do you need to do to get there? Some of it might be administrative. Most of it is technical, right? And so less of it is physical, unless you have a data center that you have to make sure that the data center is really behind the right kind of walls. But I think that understanding that is really requires that you then have to get together with your legal team. You have to get together with security, and figure out how do we frame this in a way that people know what we're talking about when we get in front of them. Um, because I've been in meetings where the CISO speaks and you see everybody's eyes kind of glaze over. The privacy officer speaks, and it's sort of like, what the flip are they talking about? Okay. And they said, well, we can't do this. Is there a problem? They don't understand that, well, first of all, the problem is you got to comply with the law. But more importantly, how does this impact my business? Why is this important to my business?
Mhm.
So getting on the same page from a communication standpoint internally is really, really crucial. Because
Is
sometimes,
that
go ahead, Renee.
is that why you think initially marketing professionals were the ones that transitioned into privacy because of that communication standpoint, or?
So I think marketing people got involved initially because the focus 20 years ago was on the privacy notice that was sent to customers and to clients. And the privacy notice gave them the opportunity to opt out of a company sharing their information with a third party or with an affiliated company. And
Mhm.
so businesses didn't want people to opt out because then that kind of reduced their ability to market effectively to them. So, excuse me. So, um, that was really what was behind reaching out to the marketing people. Can you craft the privacy notice in a way that it doesn't cause any worry or concern for our customer and they won't opt out?
Do,
Interesting. I never knew that.
do you
Fascinating.
feel that companies take more of a blanket approach to privacy, or do they have a more tailored approach to privacy based on the different rules, laws, and regs?
I think that companies are still taking a very broad approach to privacy because I think that and I will say this, I think that the privacy professionals, myself included, we haven't done a good enough job and been effective enough around helping companies understand what this really is. That it really has nothing to do with you individually. It has to do more with a broader societal um, value proposition around protecting people from from harm, and the harm is fraud or identity theft or other nefarious things that could be done with somebody's data. Europe, their their original motivation really grew out of World War II, where they, we know about the Holocaust, and so they really wanted to begin to protect the citizens of the EU in particular against something like that happening. So when you see the scope or the definition of personal information in Europe, you see how broad it is. I mean, it just covers everything down to the color of the nail polish on your toes. Um,
Wow.
Whereas in the United States, the focus has been more narrowly focused around protecting your financial information, and then they brought in healthcare, but we have a narrower focus, and with CCPA and some of the other um, laws that have kind of come to the fore in the past 20 years, they're trying to get at some additional things that GLBA, I'll tell you, it's the alphabet soup. The GLBA doesn't really cover.
Mhm.
So so I think that you're trying, privacy is still trying to find its sea legs in trying to say what is this thing really.
Yeah.
If you're talking about security controls, to me, that is more black and white. You could talk about Splunk, and you can explain what Splunk does. You can explain, um, if you have security controls to monitor other kinds of activity or to protect your data center.
Mhm.
But privacy is not necessarily a standalone because it fits up inside of things. It
Mhm.
Mhm.
fits, it's a part of say for HR, protecting employee information and protecting the information of their beneficiaries that sit in your HRIS system or that the third party has, your benefits providers. Um, it's not as obvious on its face. And so when you sit in a board meeting or you sit in a meeting with executives and you start talking about privacy, they immediately think of themselves. And that kind of gets mixed in terms of their understanding of it. So, as I said, I think that privacy professionals haven't done as effective a job of really saying what this is. I don't know that we have been as effective as getting to the table with the CISO, and that when we are talking about something, we are speaking the same language and not, you know, the CISO is speaking French and the privacy officer is speaking German. Okay.
Yeah.
Or Japanese at this point.
Yeah. But in terms of they're saying the same thing, but they're saying it in using different words basically to say the same thing.
Right. So Danielle Goodwin wants to know, do you think the rest of the United States will be as stringent as the European Union or California laws?
Um, I think the United States is trying to get there. We just keep running into roadblocks. There was the uh, I think earlier this year before the pandemic lockdown that they were looking at a national privacy law, but it was really more around data breach. So again, I don't think the United States is still getting it. I don't think Congress is still getting that. You can't just keep picking off chunks of it and then trying to address it. It is more holistic. You have to think of it in a broader sense, much like the European Union has done. So I think the United States has a long road to slog in terms of getting to the level of the EU. Now, California's law, the CCPA, helps a little bit, but that was very flawed, as you know, Danielle, as you may know. It was very flawed. They had to go back to the drawing board on it. They're still tweaking it. So I don't know that states will start to adopt a CCPA type of legislation. Similar to what they did after California was the first to come up with breach notice statutes. And the other states followed behind over the course of some almost 10 years. So I don't know that the states are ready to really adopt a CCPA type of format yet or approach.
And CCPA is the California Privacy Act?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Consumer Privacy, California Consumer Privacy Act.
Mm-hmm. So Ben wants to know, can you recommend some resources to follow, either news sites or Twitter accounts, for someone to learn more about current and future privacy regulations?
Certainly, Ben. The International Association of Privacy Professionals is probably the primary source I would recommend. They have a daily digest. That is also the certifying entity for privacy professionals. Also, the Future of Privacy Forum, which is run by a gentleman named Jules Polonetsky, which is on Twitter, is also another good source. Jules tends to have really good panel discussions. He even has a privacy book club, and some really good discussions. And he's based here in Washington, and he really keeps up on what's going on. But I would start with IAPP. I think it's privacyassociation.org is their website, and then the other is the Future of Privacy Forum.
Cool.
So for those looking to break in, are there degree tracks or certifications or trainings that you feel will best prepare them to enter into the industry?
I was wrestling with that when I was kind of pulling my notes together. So, a lot of the colleges now have, and the universities have cybersecurity programs. I think Maryland has one. I know George Washington University, where I'm at, has a cybersecurity degree program. The law schools now have privacy law programs, and I know that my alma mater, New York Law School, has one, and I will be teaching privacy law there next spring for them. The the challenge, though, is I don't know that companies are looking at entry level folks, because with privacy, you kind of have to hit the ground running. You have to kind of know the space. So I would think that the schools, and I don't know that the schools have done a really good job of trying to place the students in internships where they can become more familiar with privacy. But as I kind of did a list of all the different areas, if you're looking to get into privacy as a career, you can go a legal track, you can go a compliance track, you can do data protection or data governance. There's information security, there's investigations and forensics, there's regulatory, there's policy, there's government affairs. I think that you have to kind of identify where do you want to kind of start. Another good place is to start in a business, or start in the business line of a company where they are consumer facing, or they're collecting consumer information. We're dealing with a lot of personal data, or even healthcare data. We should never forget the pharmaceutical companies have really big privacy programs. They have to. So getting a foot in the door, I would recommend getting on the IAPP website, seeing when they have their conferences. You have to network. Start talking to people who are working in the space, who've been in the space. If you're at a company where they have a privacy officer, make an appointment to go and talk with them for 30 minutes and tell them you're interested and find out what they're looking for. I caution again that privacy teams tend to be relatively small.
Mm-hmm. How big was your team, Lydia? You had like what, 10 people?
By the time I left, I had 6. When I started, I had literally 2.5. I was sharing somebody.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I did, which was a model from the get-go when I first started in this, was to have privacy champions that sat in the business, and in a way that was deputizing them. And then there was a privacy council. And so the privacy champions became responsible for being sort of the boots on the ground and helping the business understand, for disseminating that information, to helping to implement the privacy program into their respective business areas.
Yeah. We have a couple of good comments coming in, Chris, before you jump in. Am I getting choppy?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay, awesome. So George had a question, he had a comment. The comment is, that's a real challenge, Lydia. I mean, the concept of privacy is something that should apply at an entry level easily. What do you think?
You would think that would be true, but the way privacy operates is you need to understand the applicable laws and regs. You need to understand, as I said earlier, what does the company collect? What do they do with that data? Who do they share it with? What's the scope of their data footprint, if you would? Is it global? Is it U.S. only? Is it within a particular state, for example? But privacy isn't just about coming in and reading laws and regs and what have you. It's, do you understand how privacy should be operationalized within the organization. And coming in at entry level, you're not going to know that.
Mhm.
And which is why, whether it's a privacy officer or a compliance officer or wherever privacy happens to be sitting at a particular time, um, that they're not going to look at entry level because they want people who understand the operationalization of privacy and all of the different touch points, such as security, um, such as vendor, even your facilities people, because some of it has to do with safety in the workplace. And now with some organizations stepping up their security, where they're collecting your fingerprints, um, right? That's privacy. You have to know that. So it's a great question, George, but that's the challenge, I think, for um, any student who, whether you're in a cyber program or in a law program, how do you break in?
Yeah. George also wants to know, do you think a lot of effort is placed into holding private organizations, especially social media websites like Facebook, Twitter, and Google, accountable for the way they use PII for tracking and ad analysis?
Oh my God, that's my soapbox. Well, Facebook, Twitter, Google, they are not regulated in the same way as a lot of other companies. They actually have more of a blank check to do what they want to do with our data, and that's a problem. And for whatever reason, well, they have. I think Facebook has, is it 150 to 200 lobbyists in Washington, so that to lobby against having legislation. So, and we see that Zuckerberg is in bed with the president. So, um, until there's some regulation that and walls put up around those companies, we're going to continue to see what we're seeing, which is they have their way with our data. Um, the other thing that I think is not being paid attention to is artificial intelligence, and how companies are using artificial intelligence, and the fact that um, there is no there are no regulations around that, and there are no laws currently. So, in terms of discriminatory practices, uh, what do you call it? Collusion, in terms of raising prices. That AI is being used for that, as well as even sentencing guidelines. And one of my passions is around the ethical use of data in terms of AI. So, the US has, and I think globally on AI, we have a long ways to go around trying to hone in and bring these horses back into the barn that, that Facebook, Google, and Twitter and the like have let out.
Would you say that companies struggle with data that they own as an asset, because most of the times they don't understand how the data was ingested and what the use case was at the time,
Hmm.
and then because they've owned it for so long, or because they don't know the origin of it, they just feel like they can use it as they want to, versus if it came in via a certain use case or had a certain
Hmm.
authorization, then they might abide to those restrictions.
I think that we're so far down the pike now. Um, I I I don't know. The damage has been done. I don't know how you start to pull that back. How do you start to rein it in? It's tough. Um, I didn't know that Facebook also. When did Facebook acquire Messenger? I mean, I learned that a while, but so there's so much crossing of the streams now, with all the acquisitions, that the notion of privacy is scurrilous at best. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Facebook has Messenger, WhatsApp,
Hmm.
several of the companies,
Yeah,
and
and it's
Instagram.
all.
That's right.
yeah, it seems like they acquired them simply for the user base
Hmm.
and the analytics behind it,
Right.
which is one of the uphill battles that you're facing now, especially in the EU, where you're being asked to continue to segregate the data so
Mm.
that they're not used cross-platformed.
Mhm.
Yes. So if they, if they took a page out of the books of the investment companies, and I'll use Morgan Stanley as the example. Morgan Stanley had a brokerage firm, an investment bank, and they had a trust company, and they had the Discover card. And so the four systems did not speak to each other. As much as the brokers really wanted to get the information that was in the Discover card database, they were not allowed to do that, and they were not allowed under the SEC rules, but and also by the company. I mean, if we had had something like that, hey, we'd be golden, you know. So it's okay for Facebook to acquire Instagram and WhatsApp, and God knows what else they've acquired, but um, there needed to be firewalls between those systems, and in order to at least have some measure of um, privacy, as well as some security controls, right? Easy to track.
Mhm. Yeah.
From a
So Gina,
Go ahead.
Gina, just want to chime in with some comments here. Gina says, I teach cyber classes and force my students to read the terms of use for Facebook, Twitter, Google. The looks on their faces when they are done is worth it. LOL. And then she also adds in here,
Mm.
I dare you all to go read the terms for TikTok monsters. So we had some folks on here. Germond is on here.
Hey,
Germond said,
Jamont.
right, it's Freddie Mac Central today. CFPB has fallen down on regulating this space.
Yeah, I mean, Jamon, you bring up a good point. CFPB, that the
And what is yeah.
Consumer Financial Protection Board, that was Elizabeth Warren's baby back in the day. It was really designed to help protect consumers against fraud, against privacy violations. If there's a data breach, that they were going to be the advocates for consumers. And it was fraught with a lot of controversy when it first came in, and President Obama kind of kept it going, but then a lot of the senators questioned it, and when Trump came into office, you might remember that there was a lot of controversy. He removed the head of CFPB. He was actually looking to take it down. So they were kind of on. They've been kind of walking on eggshells for the past 4.5 years, and so haven't really had the legislative or the executive branch support to move forward with any kind of reviews or enforcement actions. Similarly, the FTC, I even think that they've dialed back their oversight and their review. So we are sort of like in a soft regulatory oversight period right now as it pertains to privacy and data security. I think the last significant FTC ruling was the Wyndham case to me. The whole thing around, having a reasonable information security program.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the U.S. Compared to Europe, which they are very um, aggressive and very proactive, even before the ink was dry on GDPR, in terms of regulating and going in and making sure that companies were in compliance and are in compliance. So, the challenge in Europe is going to be Brexit, right? That now you're going to have this dichotomy in Europe, and so companies are going to have to scramble in terms of how do they comply with GDPR, and then this kind of other aspect of whether it's GDPR or something else with Brexit in the future.
Welcome to the US.
Yes, exactly.
The fun never ends. Okay, so Danielle Goodwin says small to mid-sized businesses don't understand the laws related to privacy either. BB Hamid, where's her comment? You always need to take a moment to read the fine prints before creating accounts.
Okay, I'll address Danielle's first.
So, Alf, some real buddies on here today.
Wow, yeah.
Yep.
I'll address Danielle's first.
Go for it, Lydia.
Absolutely, and I think that is a space that I wouldn't necessarily say entry level, but folks looking to do some consulting or some side business is the small to mid-sized businesses. At one point early on, I was also consulting on doing privacy notices in terms of use notices for businesses that had websites because they didn't have that information. They were collecting info and helping the owner to understand why it was important to them, because from a liability standpoint, that a breach could knock them out of business. I think that is one of the forgotten spaces is small to mid-sized companies, and they can't afford a privacy officer, and usually the security person is maybe the owner or the owner's sister or brother-in-law or somebody that so I think that is a space that's ripe for opportunity in terms of helping them to get up to speed as appropriate for their particular business. And then the second one was around, I'm sorry, what was the next one? Yeah, I guess, BB, I would want to know what kind of accounts are you talking about in terms of fine print? Are you talking about before, let's say that I wanted to, excuse me, open a BJ's account, so I'd need to read the fine print, or are you talking about, on the company side that in terms of you want to now set up these new kinds of accounts?
I think terms of service is what she means.
Okay. Yeah. So go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say back to your small and medium-sized company comment. Isn't there the impression that most of these companies are under the regulatory limits, at least in the States? For example, for CCPA, there's that minimum threshold of income or number of customers or operating scale to where these companies feel like it's not applicable to them.
That's true with CCPA, but as far as the other states, I will give you a lawyer's answer. It depends. I've not seen where there are limits necessarily as you go from state to state, and there could be that some of the small and the mid-sized companies don't apply, but I believe that GLBA say if you collect PII from a consumer, that you have to let them know that the reason why you're collecting it, what you do with it. You have to also have the appropriate means to protect it from unauthorized access. I know the GLBA doesn't have a carve out, excuse me, around the size of the company.
Wow. Learned so much this session.
So did I. So did I. Lydia, we have to have you come back. Alf wants to know if you're a Morgan alum. I know Morgan Stanley for sure.
Yes.
I don't know if you mean Morgan Stanley or
Morgan State?
not JP Morgan or Morgan State. Yeah.
No, it's Morgan
No, not
Stanley.
Morgan State, right? Morgan
Yeah.
Stanley.
JP Morgan. No, it's Morgan Stanley. And started really more at the Dean Witter Reynolds organization, and then Dean Witter bought Morgan Stanley, not the other way around. So yeah, so I was there 26 years.
Wow.
Yes.
So if this was great. I'd be happy to come back. I'll just leave everyone with some quick tips if we have time.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to get clear. If you want to be in privacy, what aspects of privacy do you want to be in? Because then you can have that conversation with, could be the CISO, the CPO. You want to get in the door, and so to get in the door, you're going to also need to know, where does privacy live in the organization? Is it in compliance? Is it in legal? Is it in the COO's organization? Is it in enterprise risk? So it's important to know where privacy lives so that you can network and reach out to the right people. And network. Find out whether there's a career path, because privacy can be a dead end. Quite frankly, if it's a small team, is there a path to go up or even to go out? When I say go out, that can you leverage the experience you get in privacy with, say, the security team or in IT? Important to bring communication skills, creative skills, partnership skills. That's key. And knowing how to advocate, because you have to be your own advocate. Because remember, people don't really understand what this is. Know the business, know the information they collect. If you get in, make internal audit your friend.
That's a good one.
Make the CISO your friend, or key members of the security team. And if you're a lawyer or a JD and you're in this space, accept that you're going to basically facilitate discussion around this, the operationalizing of the program, and educating the legal team and what those requirements are, but you're not a lawyer, okay? The legal team, they're the lawyers. So don't get into butting heads with the legal team because you have an understanding of what the laws are, and then maybe their interpretation is slightly different. So you can also kind of massage and help them maybe see it a little bit differently. But know that your role is to advance the program and not be a lawyer.
Awesome points.
Okay.
Lydia. So Romy says, as we wrap, Romy says, I work for a law firm and some of the policies integrated into the day-to-day security controls and other firms are not aligned with current framework like NIST, ISO, ITIL. Could that contribute to the reason why privacy teams are so small?
So the quick answer is the reason privacy teams are small is because the organizations don't really give privacy a lot of weight. They give more weight to and budget to your security teams and to IT. And a lot of it has to do with how effective the privacy team is in terms of communicating, what the needs are, what the requirements are, and what those touch points are. You're welcome.
One last question before you go. Mm-hmm. Would you say making privacy decisions are just like making security decisions, where it is ultimately a risk decision for the organization and they have to choose the risks that come with their decision?
I thank you for that, because I did have on here that privacy is a risk category. And so you're absolutely right. The privacy decision you make is a risk decision. And if you decide to take on a particular risk, you also have to accept that risk and accept that risk, and know that it may come back to bite you. And are you willing to are you willing to take that risk, and can you defend your decision?
Wow, we're
Like
almost at
Gina
the top
said,
of the hour.
powerful.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
The questions are still coming in, Lydia.
Wow.
So we definitely have to have you back for a part 2, because I feel like we need a privacy series. Like just this in and of itself. I mean, we typically getting to 50 minutes. It's but this is so powerful, and this information is so needed, and I don't think it's that well known on this side, in the US. And we don't talk about it as much inside of organizations, cybersecurity, that's the thing. But privacy and really understanding how it all fits together, it's really, really important.
Yep. Yes, it is. Well, this was great. I just loved meeting you, Chris, and Renee, you're my girl. I love seeing you again. Yes.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Thank you.
Great questions.
Powerful questions. Great conversation. And we will have Lydia back. It's clear. Everybody the questions are still coming, but we gotta go. So
All right,
save them
guys.
for next time. We will have Lydia back.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.